Well, welcome to the 700 Club. It's a great day here because Terry Mewson is back from her trip to Costa Rica.
It was
so
wonderful.
Tell us about it.
It was great. You know, well, you all know that OP has merged into Operation Blessing as their fifth pillar, child development, and still staying OP. And we saw the most wonderful children's projects. We have what are called hope bunkers there for kids and many times their families, and Superbook being shown at all of them.
Wonderful.
And then we visited some water projects to a whole community, had a medical outreach. We're able to give kids glasses. You know, you see people in those dire situations where they don't ever have a chance to see somebody medical, don't have the money to have their eyes examined. Can you imagine being a child? I mean, these kids were school age, and so they can't see when they go to school. So it was great, and they chose all kinds of fun colors. They get to choose their own glasses.
Well, you can obviously tell Terry's been in her happy place.
I have
she
been
looks
in
very,
happy place.
She looks very happy and very rested, and she was around a whole lot of children for a long period of time. But it's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back, always.
All right. Well, now we got to turn to some news. An Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is in a battle for historic truth in the war against Hamas. Now, here's some things that they're battling: false allegations of genocide and forced starvation in the war.
Well, one supporter of Israel is calling out powerful influencers who are critical of the Jewish state. He wants them to come and see for themselves what's really happening. Chris Mitchell tells us more.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is falsely accused on two fronts in its war on Hamas.
The first front is the actual battle zones. We have sent millions and millions of text messages, phone calls. This has never happened before in a war, that the army that is fighting terrorists in an urban environment calls on the civilians in enemy territory to leave, and the enemy shoots them if they try to leave. And then Israel is blamed for genocide. That's ridiculous. It is a blatant falsehood.
The second is the accusation Israel is starving the people of Gaza.
If we had a starvation policy, now nearly 2 years after the beginning of the war, everybody in Gaza would be dead. But they're not, because that's not our policy. Our policy is the exact opposite. We sent in 2 million tons, 1.9 million tons of food and medical aid into Gaza.
This comes as a UN-affiliated body quietly lowered its threshold of what determines a famine. The change enabled the group to declare a worst-case scenario of famine in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli government approved more than 3,000 housing units in a strategic area just outside of Jerusalem. Israel's finance minister says the move buries the idea of a Palestinian state. Tim Ballard, who leads an organization fighting sex trafficking and is the subject of the movie The Sound of Freedom, came to the region to help the Druze and Christians inside Syria suffering a genocide at the hands of Islamists.
And here's the shock. I thought we were the tip of the spear, right? I was wrong. We were not. But I'll tell you this, I was shocked and tearfully shocked to find out that the IDF has been out there without cameras, without fanfare. They've been out there rescuing the Christians and the Jews. And I'm talking like major efforts. I'm like, who are you guys?
Ballard says this is not the story being told in the West.
They don't want anyone to know. They're just helping people who are dying and bleeding and being raped and sent to sex markets. And I just felt the Spirit of God just like, they got them wrong. The West has them wrong.
He's calling on his friends Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, who are critical of Israel, to come and see for themselves.
I just want to say, will you just be open enough to come? Come. I will come with Candace. I will come with Tucker. I will come. I will take them across the border. I will show them the kids. I will walk them into Gaza.
Netanyahu says history proves lies have consequences.
I think this battle for truth has tragic historical antecedents. My father was a great historian of the Jewish people and a great historian of the Jews in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, every single massacre that the Jews suffered was preceded by a campaign of vilification and lies.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, we won't let those lies stand in our day. In that segment, we showed a picture of a baby being rocked by a mother, and that picture, that video, was designed to elicit sympathy, as if somehow mass starvation was happening in Gaza. Well, that child suffers from a genetic disorder, which is why that child looks that way. It can't take on proper nutrition. The storyline that seems to be going around the world is there's mass starvation at the hands of the Israelis. No, the starvation is at the hands of Hamas, where they're stealing the food, they're stealing humanitarian aid, then selling it on the black market in order to get more money for weapons. And that's not a new story. That's been happening for a long time. That happened before October 7th, and a famous survey by the Stanford University said the majority of the population in Gaza suffers from food insecurity. Well, the IDF wasn't involved at all then. It was entirely under Hamas. And when you consider how much humanitarian aid and assistance was being poured into that very small region of the world, it boggles your mind that people didn't have enough food. But that was the reality on the ground, because Hamas's ideology governs everything, and their ideology is quite clear. Their sole intent and purpose is to wipe Israel off the map. They don't care about their own people. They don't care about Gaza prospering and people having enough food, water, electricity. They don't care about that at all. Their main goal is to extinguish Israel. In other news, one day before the summit in Alaska, President Trump is sending a warning to Russia's Vladimir Putin. John Jessup has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. The meeting takes place at a U.S. air base in Anchorage on Friday. The president says Russia will be held accountable if there's no progress toward ending the war.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be? Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
European leaders are behind the president's call for ceasefire. However, President Zelensky voiced his skepticism. He says Putin is bluffing and is not interested in a peace deal. Now there are reports the Trump administration is sweetening the pot for an agreement, working on a deal that could give Russia access to natural resources in Alaska and rare earth minerals in areas of Russian-occupied Ukraine. Russia currently controls about 20% of Ukraine and is pushing for more in the run-up to the summit. President Trump suggesting both sides might have to agree to give up territory. Well, right here in Washington, National Guard troops are still deploying to the streets. The first batch stationed on the National Mall to keep guard around the city's iconic monuments. Officials from the Trump administration say the troops are in position to assist local law enforcement. They are unarmed, but will have access to weapons if needed. The White House says to expect a much larger National Guard presence, with a full 800 troops expected to be operational by week's end. The president is also calling for an extension of the 30-day time limit on the federal takeover of the D.C. police. Well, the Trump administration is considering reclassifying marijuana on the federal level. Right now, it's a Category 1 drug on the level of heroin and LSD. The change could open up more access to the drug. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson explains what's at stake.
Reducing marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug means cannabis shops will enjoy a reduced tax burden and greater access to banking. It would also expand research opportunities into marijuana's therapeutic potential. The president told reporters it's important to make the right decision because marijuana is a complicated subject.
I've heard great things having to do with medical, and I've had bad things having to do with just about everything else. But medical and, for pain and various things, I've heard some pretty good things. But for other things, I've heard some pretty bad things.
Last year on Truth Social, the president appeared to support reclassification by posting his administration will focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug and support safe banking for state-authorized companies and states' rights to pass marijuana laws. Marijuana is legal in 40 states for medical use. It's lawful to use recreationally in 24 states. That easy accessibility, coupled with high THC content, which makes today's pot more potent, has led to a sharp increase in cannabis poisonings, more than 22,000 last year, up from 930 in 2009. Frequently, young children are among that number.
I have taken care of numerous children over the years who have unfortunately gotten into parents, friends, relatives, marijuana or THC gummies and other candies, right? Because they come in cute little packages. They're colorful. They often look just like candy.
Overdoses can create severe symptoms like heart palpitations and agitation that often lead to hospitalization.
They may exhibit hallucinations, so they may be seeing or hearing things that are not there, which, as you can imagine, can be scary. Other people may have some gastrointestinal symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and things of that nature.
It's not only the health consequences that are raising concerns. Some warn of the spiritual dangers of marijuana.
I think for Christians, they should heed what the Bible says in 1 Peter, that we should be sober and alert. I think that if you're somebody who believes the Bible, you should look to verses like that and see that obviously getting high, whether it's marijuana or any other drug, not a very good idea.
The group Smart Approaches to Marijuana wants the Trump administration to keep the drug as a Schedule I substance. They're inviting those who share their concern to log on to noschedule3.com to sign the petition.
Then when you're done with that, you can go to our website, learnaboutsam.org. And there we have the steps for you to take to write to the White House. And then finally, you can go on social media, get on X, tag the president, tag the vice president. Let them know that you don't want them to reschedule marijuana.
President Trump says he'll make a decision on reclassification within the next few weeks. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
A lot of different viewpoints on the issue. Thank you, Lori. Gordon, back over to you.
Lots of different viewpoints on the issue. For me, I'm not in favor of criminalization. I just think that creates this incredible prison population, which is both expensive for the state to maintain and also expensive for the families involved. But here's the thing with marijuana. If you want to be mentally impaired, well, then take it. That's why we call it dope. It leads to mental impairment. It leads to memory issues. And I think one of the biggest things is it leads to a lack of motivation, where you no longer have a drive to succeed. You don't really even care anymore. So why in the world would we glamorize that and say that this is some acceptable way to escape reality? No, we shouldn't be glamorizing at all. We should be pointing out what happens to you, what happens to your IQ, what happens to any kind of concept of a career, of a family. All of these things go away if you're spending your time checking out and using this kind of substance. So let's tell the truth here, and let's make sure everyone knows it's a path to destruction. It is not in any way anything that should be glamorized.